Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Chandeep Chabra, and before I jump over to the topic of the discussion today, I'd like to thank Brian Julius and Sam McKay for inviting me to this conference to talk about, how do you validate and create complicated DAX using simple Microsoft Excel tactics. In case you have any complicated DAX or a logic that you're trying to frame in Power BI, how do you then start to create that logic in the form of Excel and take that Excel logic and form a DAX statement out of that and validate that. So we'll take a look at quite a few examples. We'll obviously start very simple and then we'll graduate to more complicated examples. We'll also maybe touch base on DAX Studio a bit to go through all of the nuances of taking a look at what's happening under the hood, but we shall have a lot of fun. All right, let's get started. All right, as the part one of the session that I have prepared, what we're going to take a look at that how do you start to validate simple calculations using Microsoft Excel. Now, if you are learning Power BI, one of the very first things that you're going to learn in Power BI is what exactly is filter context. And there are several ways of learning filter context, but I'm going to talk about filter context in respect to Excel and how can you take a look at what's happening under the hood, or how does filter context get evaluated, and you can see that while you're working with Excel. So I will introduce you to the data model that I have prepared right here. So we are working with three very simple tables right here. We have a products table, we have a calendar table, and we have the sales table. Very, very simple, nothing that complicated. If you take a look at the sales table right here, in the sales table, we just have a few standard columns that anyone would expect out of sales. We have the transaction ID, we have the sales date, some affiliate payout date, the region, the product that was sold. And this product ID is, by the way, also related to our product master or the products dimension table. We have the channel, the order type, the affiliate code, and the units that were sold. Now, obviously, in this table, I don't get to see what my total sales is. Now, the only way that I can get to see my total sales is if I take the units and multiply that with the price of the product and add them up, that's going to give me my total sales value. So I just go over to the products table and that's my price. And once I have connected these two tables with the product code right here, so these two tables are connected with the product code. So product ID here and product code right here are then related. Now, I am sure that if you have built a certain understanding of Power BI, you are aware of what iterator functions are. And I have created a very simple SumX calculation that actually does that. So I am iterating through every single row of the sales table. In every single row of the sales table, I'm doing a VLOOKUP for the price, multiplying that with the units, and then eventually totaling all of that up, right? That's my total sales calculation. And I drag that calculation to my pivot table and I get to see the total sales created. Awesome. Now, one simple question is, how do I get to validate that this number, let's say 1,111 is the correct number for the month of Feb? How do I validate that? Now, as of now, this is a ridiculously simple calculation and anybody can validate that, but let's just start simple and then proceed on to doing more complicated stuff. Now, we will try to take a look at filter context and we will try to replicate the brain of Power BI in Excel and then try to see that how Excel can help us take a look at the underlying logic of the DAX that you otherwise cannot see. All right, so what happens is that as soon as you drag the total sales calculation in the pivot table, before it starts to do the calculation, it's going to apply the filter context first. So the first context here is 2011, that's the calendar year filter context, and the second filter context here is the month of February. Now, before any calculation is carried out, these two filters are going to be applied. Now, it seems like that these two filters are going to be applied on the sales table, which is true, but these two filters, which is the calendar year filter and the month filter, are applied on the calendar table because they're coming from the calendar table or your date table. So in your date table, what's going to happen is that the year is going to be only restricted to 2011. That's one filter. And the month is going to be only the month of Feb, because right now we are trying to validate the month of Feb calculation. Now, with the 28 or 29 days, 28 days being retained in the calendar table, so 28 days of data after these two filters have been applied, the date column, which is now, this particular column, which is connected to the date of the sales right here, is going to come through this filter and try to propagate the filter in the sales table. In the sales table, all the dates which are within this Feb month, or 1st of Feb to 28th of Feb, are going to get filtered in the sales table, and then you will get to see the data within that. Now, this is a lot of words that you're trying to imagine in your head and things like that. Let's just see if we can do that same thing in Excel. So what is going to happen is that if I just maybe open the similar Excel file which contains the data, the calendar table is going to send two filters. One is the month of Feb filter, and the other one is the year of 2011 filter. All right. So I'm just going to create new columns here. Now these two columns are not physically going to be created. I'm just creating it just to help you understand. So I'm going to create one column as year. I'm just going to write a very simple function, year of this particular date. And I'm going to create another column as month, which is going to be month as 2. So I'm just going to use the month function. And on that is going to be the second month. Now let's just drag these two at the bottom and convert that to a number. And I would like to have 2011 filter, that's one filter. And I'd like to have, let's say, the month of Feb filter, and that's the two filters applied. Now, with these two filters applied on the sales table, now this is the sales table in consideration once you kind of talk about this function. So if I just go back to my calculation right here, you're going to see that this is my measure, and this measure is saying that, hey, go in every single row of the sales table. Now the sales table to this particular measure, once the measure is doing the calculation for 1111, is not the entire table. It's only the rows which are filtered in the context of Feb and 2011 year. So this is the actual sales table that the measure actually takes a look at. Now here, if I happen to write a VLOOKUP function to get the VLOOKUP of the price. So if I just say equals to VLOOKUP of, where is the product ID, and we look it up in the products table, products table, lock that. And I would want to have the first, the second, the third, the fourth column of the data. I'm sure everybody knows how to do a VLOOKUP. Close the bracket and commit and drag the formula down. That's the price that I have received. Now I'm going to do multiplication of the unit into price. So price into units is going to give me my sales value, and I total that up. Now, if you take a look at this value that has come up on the screen, it's 1110.93, which is rounded up to 1111. Now, if you don't believe me, I can just go back and I can just increase the decimal places of this, and I can say, hey, why don't you just pull up 2 decimal places? And that's the value that we also took a look at in Excel. So very, very simple way of validating what your DAX calculations are doing by just applying filter context as the way that DAX is applying in your Excel, and then you should be able to take a look at what DAX is doing. Now, this was a very, very, very simple example. Let's move over to a slightly more tricky example and then try to evaluate that. Are we able to figure out what the calculation is doing, or are we able to find out what the error is happening in the calculation? Okay, let's pick up another example, which is slightly more trickier than just doing a VLOOKUP of the price into units, which is my total sales. Okay. Let's say, for instance, my manager asks me, hey, what's the sales of the best selling product each month? I repeat the question once again. My manager asked me, what's the sales or the sales value of the best selling product for each month? That's the question. Now, first of all, let's just try to do some rough work in Excel to be able to get to the answer. Okay. So I'm just going to maybe go ahead and copy this same pivot table and put it on the right, just doing some rough work here. And I first would like to take a look at the sales of all the products, and then I'll then manually find out what the sales is and then try to validate my calculation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead in the products table and I'll get the name of the product. So product name within the month right here and expand it. And this pivot table gets expanded. Now, if you take a look at the pivot table as of now, and if you take a look at the sales for the year, the month, and all the products that we have, this is the sales of all the products. I should be able to take a look at the products right here and find out very easily by looking at the products at what the maximum sales value is. So right now, for the month of Jan, the best selling product produced a sales value of 270. That's one. If I just go over at the bottom, take a look at the month of Feb, the best sales value is 359. And for the month of March, let's just do one more. The best sales value is, let's say, 179 right here. So we have been able to identify what was the sales value of the best selling products for just a few months at the start. These are the answers that I'm expecting in this pivot table. So against the sales of the entire month, I want to take a look at only one number, which is the sales value of the best selling product. And for the month of Jan, what was that? That value was 270. So I would want to take a look at 270 to be written here as the sales of the best selling product. How do we do that? Now, I'm just going to maybe purposefully make a mistake and then try to help you validate that through Excel, obviously. So let's just get rid of, let's just keep this pivot table on the right and start to write some tags. I have already created a blank measure, which is called top product sales, which is right now blank, but let's just create some tags within that. So when I'm talking about finding out the maximum sales value, I obviously and land up with some sort of max function. Okay, so I'm going to use a function called maxx. And in the maxx function, I say, hey, why don't you just go over and step through every single row of the sales table? And I have already created a measure called total sales, and just find out what the best sales value is. I close that and I press enter. Now that has been created. I drag that to my pivot table. I'm expecting to see 270 here, but I don't get to see 270 here. What's the problem? Now let's just try to identify the problem by taking a look at the measure and validating this measure in Excel and trying to find out that what went wrong, why is it not working? All right, here the number expected is 270, but the number that I'm getting is 174. It's important for me to even understand what exactly is 174 in the first place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this DAX right here. I'm going to copy this and put this in the notepad, and let's just jump over to Excel. All right, in Excel now, and you can see that we are working with the same data. I'm just going to get rid of all the filters right here. And I'm trying to validate the calculation. I believe the calculation that I was taking a look at was about 170 or 174. This was the wrong number that appeared. I want to understand what that number is. And the correct number that I wanted to get was 270. So these are my two numbers that I'm trying to validate my calculation against. All right, in Excel now. So the first filter context against which I was trying to evaluate this 174, there are two filters against this, which is the month of Jan and the year of 2011. So I will apply these two filters and try to validate what's happening. Now, what is my DAX? My DAX is go in every single row of the sales table, and this is the sales table that we have in front of us. In every single row of the sales table, why don't you go and take a look at your total sales, and wherever you find the total sales, you just give me that value. That's what the maxx calculation is doing. But this is not going to do it for the entire data. This is only going to do it for the month of Jan, because right now we are evaluating for the month of Jan. I apply two filters. These two filters are going to come from the calendar table, but right now I'm just doing that manually in Excel. One filter is 2011 and the second filter is the month of Jan. All right, these are my rows, which is about 30 odd rows of data. And in here, I will try to validate my DAX calculation. Now let's just actually create this VLOOKUP, which we wrote initially to get the units into price calculation. And I'll drag that to all the rows of the data. It just helps me to do a bunch of work even later. So copy that VLOOKUP, paste that on the right, copy that multiplication, paste that on the top, and just paste that at the bottom as well. All right, cool. Now let's just apply the filters. This is nothing but my price VLOOKUP, and the next one is my sales value. All right, cool. And I'm just going to apply the filters. The first filter is year 2011 and the second filter is month equals to Jan, and that's my filter data. All right, now I would want to start to validate that how did I get the 174 in the first place. Now when your DAX is running, the DAX is taking a look at this particular sales table, which is right now appeared on the screen after the filters have been applied. Now because maxx is an iterator, it starts to go in every single row. In every single row, it starts to calculate total sales, which is something that we already have. Now it calculates total sales in every single row, and then it finds out, hey, what's the maximum sales value? So if I were to just go right here and sort this data in the descending order, I'm going to get the best, like the maximum sales value up on the top. And that's the 174 that we were getting in our data. But this is not the right answer. But if you could just take a look at the output in front of us, and could you tell me what exactly is this output? Think about it for a minute. This output, by the way, is not the maximum sales of the product. This output, by the way, is the maximum sales of the transaction. Your sales data was a transactional data. So every single transaction of the sales that happened has been captured against a unique transaction ID right here. And what you're taking a look at is nothing but the maximum sales transaction value. Why does it actually give you a transaction value? Because in your DAX, we said that, hey, go in every single row of the sales, and sales by the default has the granularity of transactions. Every row means one transaction, and therefore you get to see the number as 174. Now we have been able to identify what this number is, but we don't really want that 174 number. What we would want is this particular number, which is 270. That means after you have gone through this sales table, I would want you to summarize the sales table for the month by all the products that you have sold. So all of these products are going to get summarized, and then find out what is the maximum sales value. That's what I would want to do. The granularity of the sales table, I would want it to be switched up or move up to the level or rolled up to the products level data, not the transactional level data. How do we do that? Now, there are several ways of doing it. One of the easy ways to do it is that you already find that do you have a table at the granularity at which you would want the data to be summarized or not? Do you already have a table in the model or not? So let's just go take a look at the model once again. In the model, this table has the granularity of a day. That means one row in this table means one unique day. In this particular table, the granularity is one row means one unique product. So we already have the table at the granularity of the product. And if I just go ahead and if I just change my measure and I say that, hey, don't step inside every single row of the sales table, please step inside every single row of the products table, which has the one-to-many relationship, pretty cool, and then calculate total sales. This is going to trigger context transition and you are going to get the right value. Awesome. Now that is the 270 that we were trying to chase for. Now, if you take a look at what we have been able to do is that, where are you? What we have been able to do is that we have been able to create this little table after the filter context have been applied. So once the filter context has been applied, which is 2011 and the month of Jan, it goes in every single row of the products table, which is where you have unique products, which is like something like this. And then it calculates the sales against every single product. It finds out the maximum sales and then pushes that number right here. All right. Now, all of this have been very, very helpful because we understood what is happening and we took a look at the example in Excel, and it just makes it a lot more easier to understand what's happening and just even validate your calculations using simple Microsoft Excel filtering tactics. But you need to understand what the function is doing and what exactly is the meaning of filter context and how does it work. Now let's proceed on to even more trickier example, which is where we'll take a look at how to use Excel extensively to even build the logic in your mind, right? So we'll take a look at that. Stay tuned. All right, in this example, I'm going to talk about a SaaS company which is selling software as a service and they are billing data or the sales data. And we have to actually calculate the upgrades, that how many people upgraded from the basic version of the product to the professional version of the product. Just a bit of a summary that a SaaS company is going to bill the customers monthly on the product that they're using, and the customers can choose to be on the basic version of the product, which is where they pay less fee, and they can also be on the more expensive version of the product, which is where they get more features and they pay a higher fee, like something like a Power BI Pro or a Power BI Premium. All right, let's just take a look at the data here. It's a very simple data. It's a transactional data. So we have the transaction date, we have the transaction ID, we have the user's email, we have the user's ID, and we have the versions of the products. And you can see that for every single product that the company has, we have the basic version of the product or the professional version of the product. And we also have that what product does the company have. So company has got two products as of now. There's a Productify software and a Supernotes software, something like that. And we would want to find out that every single month, how many people are upgrading from the basic version of the product to the professional version of the product. That's what we would want to take a look at. Now, how are we going to try to solve this problem? I mean, if you think about it, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to Excel, and before I start to fight with DAX, I will do a lot of manual work in order for me to just understand that what am I going to do to even get to the answer manually, so that I feel confident that I at least understand the problem and what are the right answers that I'm trying to expect. By the way, if you take a look at the home page right here, I have already given you the answer that this is what I would want to see as an output. Here is the month, and here is one upgrade happened in the month, two upgrades happened in that month, four upgrades happened in this month, so on and so forth. But this is what we are trying to achieve. But for now, we'll just jump over to Excel, play around with data, trying to form the logic, and then we'll come back to Power BI and start to build the logic as the way that we have taken a look at that in Excel. All right, in Excel, and I've loaded the same data in Excel. Let's just try to build a few pivot tables and just try to understand that how are we going to even start to think about building a solution of this problem. For now, I'm just going to keep one number in mind. Let me just try to chase that number. So for now, I can just take a look that in my output right here, in the month of August, I had one upgrade. That means I'd have to compare that to the month of July, and from the month of July to the month of August, one person might have moved from the basic version of the product to the professional version of the product. That's what should have happened. So therefore I have the number one. All right, let's just jump back to Excel and try to solve that. I'm going to create a very simple pivot table from this data and just try to validate the answers. So I'm just going to maybe create this into a table, make a pivot table on the new sheet, and I am going to put the date right here. Where is the date? Transaction date goes in right here. And let's just actually put the date in the filters. So this goes in the filter, and I'll just get that out. And what I would want to do is I would want to put the user ID, and I would want to put the name of the product, and I would want to apply another, let's say, a filter. Okay, this is good. Now I'm just going to maybe flatten out the pivot table. So grand totals off, subtotals off, report table, tabular format. Just going to clean that up. All good. Now there are a bunch of filters that I would want to apply on this pivot table, that I would like to say that, hey, first of all, I'm looking at the month of August for now, or let's just say I'm looking at the month of July for now. So I'm picking up 2019 right here. That's my first filter. And I'm taking a look at the month of July for now. So July right here, say okay. And you can see that these are the people, and I only have to take a look at the basic version of the product because the upgrade is going to be done from the basic to the professional version of the product. So I'm just going to take a look at the base version of the product. So now if I apply the filters, a bunch of filters on the data, I can see that there were 3 people for whatever products we had. So there were two products for whatever products that we had. There were 3 people working on the basic version of the product in the month of July. Now, if I get to see the same 3 people for the same product, if I get to see on the professional version of the product in the month of August, that is when I will say that the upgrade has happened. All right, let's create the same pivot table once again on the right hand side. And I'm going to apply a bunch of filters on this pivot table. I'll say, hey, this time you're going to be for the month of August. That's 1. And the version of the product is not going to be basic, but it's going to be professional. All right, say okay. I'll say okay. Now let's compare these 2 pivot tables and just try to make some sense out of that. Now there happens to be a customer ending with 679. If I take a look at 679, I don't really have to see that. I don't get to see that customer. So that's out. There happens to be a customer called 639. I get to see that customer. Let's just validate that customer. That customer was using a product called Productify in the month of July 2019, and he was on the basic version of the product. Good. If I take a look at that same customer in the month of August 2019, that same customer is now on the same product, Productify, and is now have moved to the professional version of the product. So for this customer, I would want to mark him as 1, or I would want to mark him as an upgrade, and I would like to count the number right here. Now this is what I have to do for the entire data, and I have to find out that compared to the current month, how many customers have upgraded from the previous month. That's the problem that I have to solve. Now, how do I start to solve this problem? Now, I have been able to solve that in Excel manually by creating pivot tables, but I would want to write some DAX out of it. How do I do that? Actually, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I have done that in Excel, and I will just take this DAX and I'll form some sort of logic. What have I done? Let's just try to summarize that. The first thing that I have done here is that I have applied a filter, which is the year filter and the month filter, which I am obviously going to get right here. So if I just maybe jump over to my Power BI, you can see that we already have the year and the month filter. So I don't really have to worry about this filter as of now. Take a look at the next filter. I am not taking a look at the actual all the transactions of the month. I am just taking a look at the summarized table by the user and by the product. Right? And this particular table, which has got 2 columns, user and the product, has got a filter on top of that. That means I'm only taking a look at that 2 columnar table by a filter called the base version of the product. That's 1. On the right hand side, this is the current month, which is the month of August. And I can see that again, the same 2 filters have been applied, which is nothing but what I'm going to get through my pivot table. But here again, we have 2 columns, user and the product, and the version is the professional version. So if you take a look, this is the previous month, that's filter number 1. So previous month, that's one filter that we have to apply on this table. We also need to summarize this table by the user and the product. And so summarize by user and product. And we also have to take a look at this table for only the basic version of the product. So the version should be equal to basic. That's my filter condition. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm just going to paste this on the right hand side. And here in this table, this is going to be for the current month. And this is again summarized by the user in the product, and the version is going to be professional. All right. Now, if you take a look at the logic here, the logic is pretty straightforward. The only thing that you have to keep in mind that these filters, when applied on the data set, they are going to produce you tables. So this is nothing but a table, a 2-columnar table. This is nothing but a 2-columnar table. Now, you can't really try to work with tables. Of course, you can work with tables, but unless you aggregate a table and create a sum out of it or a count out of it, you would not be able to work with the table. So what I need to do is, once I have been able to create these two tables, this table and this table according to the filters, then I need to do some sort of reconciliation check between the tables that, hey, why don't you match the rows in the table? Are the rows matching? Is this matching here or not? If they are matching, then it's an upgrade. If it's not matching, then it's not an upgrade. It's just a blank, right? That's what I have to do. So I not only have to create the tables, but also perform some reconciliation checks to find out that which rows are common between the two tables. Once I have been able to do all of that work, then I'd be able to form that logic. Now let's just jump over to Power BI and start to build our logic using DAX. All right, in Power BI, once again, let's just try to form the logic. Now, I've already created a blank measure called upgrades. I'm just trying to write some DAX right here. Now, the first thing that I will do is I will try to get the table for the current month summarized by the user and the product, and that is only going to be looking at the professional version of the product. So I'm just going to create a variable, and I'm going to say that this is my current month professional table, and that is going to be something like a calculate table. I'm not sure why is the IntelliSense not working. Calculate table. Now, in the calculate table function, I'm going to say that, hey, I'm trying to summarize the data, and I am going to summarize the data by two different dimensions. I would want to have the user ID, and I would want to have, let's say, the product, the name of the product. All right. So that's the summarized data. But I'm trying to apply a filter on this, and that's the reason why I use the calculate table function, because the calculate table function can apply filters to tables just like the calculate function. So here is where I will declare a filter. That means the version of the product is going to be the professional version of the product. So professional version. All right, version. Okay, pretty good. I'm just going to do the return. And I'm going to say, hey, the current month pro table is the output. Let's just see what do we get as an output. Now, this is not working. Okay, this obviously is not working because of the reason that in Power BI, you cannot really return the full table as an output. You have to return an aggregated table as an output. It needs to aggregate to a single value, maybe a sum, a count, or something. So I'm just going to maybe do a count for now. So I'm just going to say, hey, do a count rows of this table and close the bracket and press enter. I get to see that in the month of August, which is right here, I have two people sitting on the professional version of the product, whatever product. Let's just go validate that. I'm going to open up Excel, and you can see that we applied a bunch of filters, and in 2019 August, there were two people on the professional version of the product, and that is what we are also getting as an answer right here. So our DAX seems to be working fine as of now. All right, now this table, which is a two-row table, needs to be compared with the previous month table, and the filters that we need to apply are one filter is going to be the previous month filter. The other filter is going to be the version of the product is going to be basic, and then we'll again summarize by the user and the product. So let's just do that. I'm going to come right here. I'm going to copy this entire DAX calculation, and I'm going to say this is going to be my previous month basic table. So base table. All right. Calculate table remains the same. The summarize remains the same. This is going to be the basic version of the product. So I'm just going to write basic here, but there is additional filter. That means this table is not going to be created for the current month. It's going to be created for the previous month. So I'm just going to maybe add a filter, and I'm going to say this is going to be the previous month of the calendar date, which is nothing but my simple time intelligence calculation. I'm going to say that, hey, this time, why don't you count the number of rows in the previous month table? So PM base table, press enter, and let's just see what we get. It is actually giving me a blank. Let's just see why is that. I think I must have made a spelling error. Oh, this is base version. It's not basic version, it's base version. So spelling errors. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and fix that. So base version, press enter. And now in the month of August, I get to see the number 3. Let's validate that. So the filter context is the month of August. That means this is the filter context. From this month, if you take a look at the previous month, the month of July, you do see that there are 3 people on the basic version of the product, and that's what you are now taking a look at. That's pretty awesome. Now, we have been able to get the 2 tables. As of now, these 2 tables are aggregated, and what you're taking a look at is the number of rows in the 2 tables. So this is 2 rows of data, and this is 3 rows of data. Pretty good. Now, I don't really want to have the number of rows of the tables. I want to kind of compare the tables within themselves, and I would want to find, are there any rows common between the 2 tables or not? Because if there are any rows common between the tables, that means that person has upgraded the product. So this guy is also right here, and this guy has upgraded, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my calculation, and I'm going to use a simple function called the intersect function. So I'll say intersect. In the intersect function, it says, hey, returns the rows of the left side table, which also appear on the right side table. That means that I want to take a look at the base version, the previous month, which also should appear in the current month pro table, right? Now, the intersect function also gives you a table as an output, and it compares the entire row. It doesn't just compare the user ID, it compares the entire row. And because it compares the entire row, therefore I have just created a 2-columnar table for the user ID and the product in both the tables right here. Okay, now this gives me a table. It doesn't really give me like a single value output. However, I can just aggregate that, and I can say something like count rows around that, and I just want to count the number of rows in the tables that I have. Press enter, and that is the answer that I was trying to seek. So 1 here and the 1 here actually matches, and this is the guy who actually upgraded. Now this is pretty cool. The problem, however, is that if you take a look at the output at the total level, I also want to find that at the year level for the entire year, how many people were upgraded. But here we don't really have any totals. The first thing that I would want you to think about is that why do you not have the totals here? Could you maybe try to formulate that logic in Excel and try to find out that what is the problem? Once we have figured out what the problem is, we'll then start to move over to DAX Studio and take a look at slightly more advanced application of debugging and solve the problem from there on. Stay tuned. Okay, before we start to solve the problem, it's very important for us to understand that why in the first place are the totals not appearing. So we'll do some work in DAX Studio and try to figure out that why is the total not appearing in the first place. Now, if you think about it just for a second, you're going to find that at this place, at the total level, there's no filter context on the data here. It's the entire data that has been taken a look at. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to DAX Studio and trigger it and try to write some DAX to help you understand that why exactly is this coming up as a blank. So I'll just maybe open it on the side here and just collapse that, push this to the right, store it on the right, and let's just start writing DAX here. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say evaluate, and I'm just going to say, hey, evaluate the entire table called data. And I'm just going to say run, and the entire table is in front of me. Now, this is the entire table that Power BI is taking a look at the total level, because there is no filter context. The table is completely unfiltered. All right. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe write the summarize function and only write one part of the logic and help you understand that why is there an error. Okay. So remember that we created a couple of variables in our DAX, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy one of them, which is this one right here. I'm just going to copy that and just move over to DAX Studio and just paste that right here. Now, this is the table that we are creating, which is where we are summarizing the data by the user ID and the product, only taking a look at the base version of the product for the previous month. But this calculation is now, imagine we are running it on the total level to find out that why is there a blank. So if I just run this particular calculation at the total level, I actually get nothing. The reason why I don't get anything is because that at the total level, which is the entire data, there is no context for the previous month. The previous month can only be evaluated if in the pivot table you have, let's say, the month of Feb, and for the month of Feb, there is a previous month, which is the month of Jan. Therefore, there is no previous month, and because there is no previous month, all of this summarize actually returns you a blank, because once this filter is applied, there is no data to take a look at. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to first of all understand that how are we going to get around the problem that in case we would want to have the total as well included at the bottom. So if I just go over to my Power BI, in my Power BI, now if you think about it just for a second, at the total level, you don't want the filter context to change. You don't really want to take a look at the entire data. All that you would want at the total level, you would want to take a look at this very data, which is summarized by the year and the month. And then you would want to, kind of sum every single value right here. So now we have understood that at the total level, just open DAX Studio and I'll just say data, press F5 to run. All right, at the total level, what happens is that, let's just adjust that for a quick second. Okay, now at the total level, Power BI takes a look at the entire table and therefore it has the deepest granularity of the data. However, in order for us to get the total, what we would want is that as soon as Power BI reaches at the total level, then I would want Power BI to take a look at not this table, but this table, which is summarized by the month. And it has also got the individual values. What values? The upgrades that happened in every single month. So it has got these values, and at the total level, I just want to sum up these values and I would want to write it right here. Now, in order for me to create that level of calculation, what I need to do is I need to write that calculation without any filter context and create this type of a table. If I'm able to create this type of table at the total level, I should be able to then just sum up these values and solve the problem. So our job in DAX Studio is going to be that right now, when I'm creating a calculation right here or a table right here, there is no filter context because there is no pivot table or any chart or any visual. So whatever work that we are doing it right here is going to be applied at the total level as well, right? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to summarize my data, and I'm going to say, hey, why don't you summarize the data table and summarize it by the calendar. And I have a month year column, and I'll close that. And I'm just going to say run, and that's the column that I would want. Now against in this column, I would want to find upgrades as a calculation created, and I should have the numbers, which then I would be able to sum at the bottom, right? So this is what I'm trying to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a column in this table. So I'm just going to use the function called add columns, and I'm going to say that, hey, here is a table, and this table I would want to create a new column called upgrades, and the new column will have some calculation. For now, I'm just going to give this as 1. That means just write 1 all across, close the bracket and press enter just to make sure it's running. And it is giving me 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now the 1 obviously doesn't make any sense, but we'll just try to modify this 1 and try to come up with the same number as we would have got it earlier. Now, if you think about it just for a second, how were we getting this number, the number for upgrades? The way that we were getting the number for upgrades is that we were taking a look at the current month and the previous month, trying to match it through the intersect function, and then trying to figure out that which customers move to the professional version of the product. All of that work, we have to do it once again in this particular add columns function right here. So I'm going to get rid of the 1 and start to declare a couple of variables. So I'm just going to maybe go ahead and copy a bit of my DAX right here. So this is my current month pro table. I'm just going to come right here, Control C, go back to my DAX Studio, and I'm just going to declare a variable. I'm just going to call this as my current month pro table, current month pro table, and that is good. Now I'm just going to say return, and I'm going to say that, hey, why don't you return the current month pro table as an output. Let's just format this tag. Short line is what I like. We're good to go, and we'll run it. Now this query gives you an error. We'll have to figure out that why are we getting the error in the first place. Now the problem with the error is that if I just happen to write 1 here and I just run it again, the query runs just fine. But if I happen to return this variable, it doesn't actually give me the value. The reason why it's not giving you the value is because this calculate table function delivers you a table as an output, and here in this cell right here, you can't feed a table. You have to feed a single value as an output. So if I just happen to just create like a count rows function and then surround the current month pro table within that, it should work. So I will just say return, and there are your answers. Now in the month of August, we saw that we had 2 people on the professional version of the product, so numbers are good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another variable. So I'm just going to go back to Power BI and copy the same calculation, Control C, and paste that right here and mark that under a variable called the previous month base table. All right. And we are good. All is good. Okay, and we'll just maybe test that out as well. So previous month base table, click on run. And against the month of August, we are seeing 3 people which were there on the basic version of the product. So this is all good. Now, all that we would want to do is intersect. So I'm just going to maybe just say something like intersect of the 2 tables that we have created. The base version table, what's that called? Previous month base table. And I would want to create current month pro table. These are the intersectors done. That means the reconciliation, are the rows matching or not, that has been done. And now I will again get a table which I have to summarize, and I will say count rows of this table. All right, close the bracket, press enter and click on run. And therefore we are getting that number 1. Now you can see that as of now, there is no filter context, and we have been able to create this table. Before August, there was no upgrade. So this is all blank, but after August, there have been upgrades. So this is all filled up. Now, all that I would want to do is this DAX that we have been writing gives us a table with 2 columns of data. One is the month year column, the other one is the upgrade column. And I just want to go through every single row of this table, and I would want to sum this number is all that I would want to do. So I'm just going to maybe copy this DAX, Control A, Control C, go back, and I will say, hey, in this upgrades calculation, I would want to paste this DAX that I just copied. The problem, however, is that this DAX is not going to work because this DAX was delivering us a table. Now that we are creating a measure, we can't really feed a table as an input. So what I need to do is I need to go inside of this table, and I'll say, hey, here is a table that gives you 2 columnar values, and I would want to sum the upgrades table of this, right? That's it. So this table gave us 2 columns. One was the month and the year column. The second column was the upgrades column. And I'm saying, hey, why don't you go inside every single row of the table? That's what the SumX means. And then in every single row of the table, just pick up this value of upgrades and you sum that up using the SumX function. Sweet. Now press enter and let's just see what we get. We do get the answer as 71. That's brilliant. All right, that's been it. I hope you like this one. I am a very avid user of Excel, and I have learned DAX by taking the data back into Excel, trying to formulate the logic in Excel, trying to visualize DAX as much as possible through filter context, applying filters, taking a look at the underground work that is happening in Excel, and then trying to come up with the logic. And I tried to give you 2 or 3 examples that from the simple level to the more advanced level. I hope those examples were helpful in trying to understand that how can you maneuver through the data and try to replicate DAX's brain in Excel and trying to come up with your own logic. That's been it. I enjoyed the session and look forward to meeting you at some place again. Thanks so much, and I'll catch you. Bye.